Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland and happy hollow days, you robots. Yes, it's Christmas. What is Christmas? December the 25th. What does that mean? Well, first of all, it's a Julian calendar, which is a business calendar. It has nothing to do with the calendars of old, the Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian, which had more to do with the stars, and you say, well, how do they know about the stars? And they had these observatories, right? But they did not have trigonometry or algebra or even geometry. How did they build the pyramids? The pyramids at Giza, they, each corner is north, south, east, west, direct. I mean, they had no compasses. How did they get it perfect? And all the stones, when they were laying down stones that weighed 60, 70 tons, um, that you can't even put a razor blade between. I mean, with a bunch of guys, slaves, rolling them on logs. The whole interior of the great pyramids at Giza are made out of granite. Closest granite is, 500 miles away. They had to bring it down, if they did, bring it down the river and then move it, 30 miles in sand, and these things were supposed to be built in 20 years. I don't know. So it lends itself, and there are, like in the major pyramids at Giza, there are no, they say, oh, they're burial facilities for the Egyptian pharaohs. Well, there are other burial tombs for Egyptian pharaohs, and they're full of stuff, and they're full of you know drawings and paintings and pretty stuff. So when you're dead, you can appreciate it, but not the major pyramids of Egypt, the big ones. They seem to be very similar to Tesla's power station in the Borden Cliffs facility in Shoreham, Long Island, which, 70 years later, Long Island Lighting Company and J.P. Morgan Bank build the Shoreham nuclear power plant right on top of it. Right? I mean, literally on top of where the Warden Cliffs facility was, right on the corner of 25A and Tesla Boulevard. So there are so many, things that just don't make sense. Like, let's take a look at this. And here it is, Christmas. And really, all it is a business holiday, right? Pretty much that's all it is. And, I mean, that's, my perception of it.
Effects of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. It was busy putting together new doctrinal... The fifth kind. I've been a preacher for more than 30 years. I've studied and taught through the book of Genesis many, many times in churches all around the world, and I've trained pastors in the skills of interpreting text. You translate Elohim in the plural, it all makes sense. But what we actually have is a conflict among the sky people, among the powerful ones, over how intelligent the human species is to be. They formed something called a Sky Council, a group species, all with a stakeholding in Project Earth and bumping up against each other in the process. This knowledge repeats in narratives all around the world. Check out our official website at fifthkind.tv.
It's a good channel.
In 1896, eminent scholar Nathaniel Schmidt was fired from his position as professor of Semitic languages at Colgate University. For 11 years, this American university had enjoyed Nathaniel Schmidt's erudition in Semitic languages. He delivered numerous courses in Hebrew, Aramaic, Coptic, Arabic, Syriac, and other ancient languages besides. In fact, Nathaniel Schmidt was one of America's leading scholars in the field. So why, after 11 years of outstanding achievement, was he tried for heresy and fired from his tenure in 1896? Though a devout Christian and a Baptist pastor, the authorities considered that his recent theological papers had struck at the very roots of two world religions, Christianity and Judaism. What Nathaniel Schmidt had done wrong was read the Sumerian and Babylonian and Assyrian texts and notice that they were full of fascinating parallels, stories that occurred there that were uncannily similar to all the stories and beginnings of the Bible. Stories like Adam and Eve, the fall, Cain and Abel, the flood, the limiting of human life, the event at the Tower of Babel. And Schmidt's work demonstrated that the Sumerian accounts and those that followed it from nearly 6,000 years ago were in all probability the source of all those familiar biblical stories. Now, that was a problem in the 1890s, because if you think about it, the church was still reeling from the after effects of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species. It was busy putting together new doctrinal bases and new doctrines of biblical inerrancy to shore up the ship. So the idea that the Bible might actually be based on somebody else's stories was a bit of an embarrassment. It shouldn't have been, because Judaism and Christianity both find their roots in the story of a Sumerian family, the family of Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah grew up and spent the best part of their lives in Ur of the Chaldees, a Sumerian culture. And so when they emigrated from there, it's hardly surprising that they would carry with them all the stories of beginnings that they had grown up with, and sow them into the foundations of what was to become their culture, their religion, and their Bible. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that in the Bible we have a summary version of all these stories that pepper the Sumerian, Babylonian, and Assyrian texts. The problem and the shock horror is that the original versions, the Sumerian versions of these stories, make no mention of God at all. In the Sumerian originals, these are stories of our ancestors' contact with another species, a species called the Anunnaki. Could Judaism and Christianity's familiar stories?
And that's why, in 1991, April Glaspie, who is our representative in Iraq, and Saddam Hussein goes, hey, listen, this place over here, Kuwait, used to be part of Iraq. I mean, I was, in the government, and the English just sliced it off because it has more oil over there. And, we want it back. Is America going to get upset if we take it back? And April Glaspie said, that's, your business. You do whatever you need to do. We're not going to really, be involved. So he rolls in there with one of his armies, tanks and armored personnel carriers, and he just, goes into, right around the guys who are in charge and say, okay, we're taking it back. And he does, right? And he doesn't kill zillions of people. He doesn't, because most of them are Kuwaiti, and a lot of them are happy that he's back. But what the real story was, months and years before that in Kuwait, the English and French and German were digging up things in the desert that were these Sumerian artifacts that represented technologies that were, basically zero-point energy, time travel, stargates. All, that TV show that was on Sci-Fi 20 years ago, that came from the movie Stargate, and that was true. They had that. The Air Force gave those TV guys total access to a great deal of stuff and kind of patted them on the back and gave them medals and all kinds of stuff to say what a great job they were doing, representing what the Air Force was. And The real deal is that the U.S. Navy, because they've been around longer than anybody else, before the armies and, the Navy was the real deal. And so they had intelligence, back in the day before friggin' the revolution, the Navy had, the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI. And so they knew, they were paying for all kinds of smart guys like me, who were, itinerant scholars, who were looking at stuff that the scholastics weren't, and so I've experienced a great deal of this stuff. And so I'm watching on the YouTube all these really interesting channels talking about stuff, and I'm going, yep, that sounds right. That sounds good. And the whole thing about, whatchamacallit, dark journalism, where he's going to about exnopery. Again, I got to remember, I can't speak or see or hear, so I'm doing pretty good. And so when you see all of the populations being swayed by their social media, their Facebook things, their this, their that, it's really, I mean, this is just your opinion, and you're going to go to the mat and I believe in this and you're wrong. Sorry, nobody's really right and nobody's really wrong, because it's just an opinion. Now, if you discipline yourself and you go in deep, like that guy who I started up there with, you start to see things that basically the powers that be don't want you to see. And so you get distracted by having Christmas and having Easter and having Halloween and having, I mean, these are all representative of ancient holidays, but we don't even know what they're connected to. All we're saying is, oh man, I want a new baseball glove, or I want a new pair of underpants, or a tie, or whatever. And our whole existence has been brought into materialism, right? Into a mercantile state. Even our religion is actual. Meaning, if I do this, if I pray to God so many times, like I was a Catholic, and you'd go to confession and you'd have to do so many Hail Marys and, Our Fathers, and then you were forgiven. And then you could go do the sin again. You're told that having an impure thoughts was like a mortal sin, and how can you not? You see Susie Cream Cheese walk by you, it's like, I'm pure fun. Oh my God. So it's interesting. And the interesting thing is that no one seems to really care, about anybody else. No, the sense of empathy is like going down, and all the stuff, everyone's in their own little silo. If you're not watching X, Y, or Z channel, then you are wrong. If you're not in my silo, you are wrong. And I'm just going to scream at you as loud as I can and put my fingers in my ear and go, la, 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 la. So, now, Christmas, this holiday, is a holiday of memories. Personally, memories. If you get caught up in the idolatry, or in the belief structure, or the pedodology, or the stuff that's in the holy book, no, as a guy was saying, it's kind of embarrassing for the religions to realize that everything that's in their holy book actually comes from some other culture that's talking about something different, that they had no gods. They just had these folks who came from different places. Like, did you know that there's a planet a little bigger than Earth that's right behind the sun? We can't really see it. Every now and then, as all the planets are going around in their orbits, that planet behind the sun does kind of come out, and many a stargazer has noticed it, and we've sent satellites out there and we've taken pictures of it, but we don't talk about it, right? And it seems to have the same kind of, it's like basically a twin of us. It's the same distance from the sun as we are, but on the other side of the sun. And we're closer to Mars, it's closer to Venus. And so, but it has an atmosphere. And what's really interesting, when we dropped the Viking satellites onto Mars on the birthday of our 200th birthday, in 1976, it had actually a little shovel that dug up dirt and then stuck the dirt into a thing that could, add water to it and then see what the dirt did. And the dirt gave off, meaning how you know if something is alive is if it gives off waste, right? And so they added water to the dirt and let it, percolate, and it was giving off waste, which is a pure right-on sign that there's life on Mars, right? The other thing that the pictures that were taken by Viking, the sky was blue, right? And the land was not red. And so when these pictures came back, they reframed them. They put them through different, when they printed them up, they put lenses to make things redder. And so you didn't see a blue sky. And a number of, so we sent other instruments there. And what was truly interesting, I'm not quite sure if it was like one of the latter, instruments that have been sent in the last 20 years. But we sent one that was kind of close to Viking, right? And it kind of rolled over there and it found footsteps. And as it was looking at Viking, someone walked in front of our little cruiser, and they weren't wearing a spacesuit. They were just wearing something you might wear in the Arctic because it's pretty cold there. It's 18 degrees, right? Fahrenheit, it can be nippy there, right? In the sun, and warm day, it's 18 degrees. So, below freezing. So, there's all of this stuff like right in front of your face. Now, I've been, spending my whole life looking at things that most people don't look at. And and that's the beauty of, I love YouTube, in that even though YouTube is getting pretty, cutting people off, but no, basically people who make a big hubbub about being right or wanting to do this or blah, blah, blah. Now, I keep saying, good morning, good evening, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob, your griot, here to tell you a story. And don't believe a word I say. This show is just for your entertainment. I'm just telling you stories, right? And, so that's what I'm doing. Just telling you stories. And, but there are a lot of folk who, just kind of take it to the mat in the conceptual notice of whether, they're right or not, right? So, where is this? There is Crypto Unveiled. So these guys Mind Unveiled. Very nice. There's a guy named Soul and his sweetie named Moon, and they put together some nice shows, right? And
as we enjoy the holidays and prepare for a new year, consider getting rid of those leftover prescriptions and expired over-the-counter medications.
Don't stop going to get the fire.
Welcome, and today we're going to be talking about some new topics that's never been brought up on the channel. We're starting a new series called Cryptids Unveiled. There's really so much ground to cover, and I think it'll be interesting to view these topics from an occult mindset. This series will start off with an introduction, and then move on to more specific cases where we can learn more about each cryptid on its own and viewing their history. You most likely have heard of cryptozoology, but if you look it up on Wikipedia, they don't take it seriously at all. They actually have a quote that just says how humans are the most gullible of all creatures, when there is in fact truth to this subject, especially when you consider some of the animals that were thought to be extinct by the scientific establishment, but later found out to be still alive in very small, rare amounts. Then you have the propaganda, and to me, this is what really ruined the field, is that from the 80s to the early 2000s, you have all these shows that tried to ride this trend, but in the end, with every episode, you would realize that they never really found anything. Some of the earlier ones were really good, but as you get to the newer content, it's obvious that this has been corrupted and just used to make money off of people who believe in this stuff. And now, today, there are barely any shows on the subject. But now, it's become a joke. And many of you who are new to this subject,
And that is pretty much what has been going on. That's why we had Donnie Trump as president. It was to make everything you saw a joke. He lied so much. He told the truth. He did. Everything he said. This is fake news. Well, it's been fake news, since they were putting it in cuneiform tablets. It's like, if it leads, it bleeds. So I worked as a photojournalist, and for a good 2.5 years, that was like my career. And I took some pictures that, captured some truth, and I had a style that, the way that I am. Most photojournalists, just go there to take the, if it bleeds, it leads, right? Goes and gets that shocking image. Me, I was schooled by Lisette Model and Cartier-Bresson. And before I studied with them, they were my favorite photographers when I was a high school person. Ansel Adams, them, and a few others. I liked Ouija. But my whole trip was to I had my Aunt Gracie. I spent a lot of time with her. She had this little teeny apartment in Manhattan, in Tudor City. And she was like, had a Murphy bed, and you pushed a button and the kitchen came out of the wall. It was like, under 400 square feet. And, but her views, she was on a 20-something story of this building, and the views were down the Hudson, across the street from the United Nations, down the Hudson. So it was like the UN down to Statue of Liberty. The other way, out her bathroom window, when you were sitting on the can, pinching a loaf, you saw, the Empire State Building. And she said she was on the can one night, and she was pinching a loaf, and it was foggy, and the lights were on, and she saw a B-25 fly right into the Empire State Building. It was doing 280 miles an hour, and, it's a pretty big airplane, weighs about, 20 tons, and it flew and she said the Empire State Building didn't even move, and the airplane flew into the Empire State Building, exploded and burnt, and stuck in the side of the building, right? And it burned and it burned and it burned itself out. After it burned up all the fuel, and once the fuel was burned up, that was it. And, it burned a part of the floor, not the whole floor or the building floors above or below, just that. And it smashed into the 60th something floor. And that should have given us thought when, the World Trade Centers got hit, because if you understood how the World Trade Centers were built, they were built to sustain 2 707s hitting it at the same time. And the whole structural finesse of the building was not the floors, but the outside walls. That held the hollows. Each one of the floors of the World Trade Center was an acre big, and there were no columns because the outside walls were so robust that it held the whole building up. And the way it was designed, each floor was 4 foot thick of 6-inch rebar, 20 mats of each, and aircraft cable, the stuff that they hold the George Washington Bridge up, wove back and forth. And when they poured the floor, they kind of restricted it, poured the floor, and then let it go, and then tied it off. And that's called pre-stressed concrete. 100 times stronger than regular concrete, and it had a ton of steel in it, along with electric pipes and the water lines and the sewer lines and you name it. So to think that those floors could collapse on each other, basically the way it was designed, if one of those floors, let's say, were to collapse, boom, it would make the next floor stronger, right? The stress on that floor would make it stronger. So if the building actually did fall down by what they say happened, the floor would go, ooh, boom, hit that floor, and then go, boom. And, but what did we see on the video that they played non-freaking stop was that the building turned into dust. The only way that, and it flowed like water, like it was a waterfall of the building. And the building collapsed faster than gravity, meaning if they had stuck a bowling ball on top of the antenna, and the building just fell straight down. Didn't fall over, didn't fall in parts. It just fell straight down, right? And you did see explosions, boom, 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 boom. And I think that was just there to be a false narrative of, oh, look, that looks like controlled demolition, but it wasn't. The buildings were taken down by space-based weapons that basically turned the matter into dust, meaning it changed its reference in our little dimension, and it did this. So instead of being strong and hard and rigid, it turned to dust. And it just came down. And most of that dust was asbestos. And that's why more people died of breathing that than died in the buildings. Somewhere around 3,000 died in the buildings, but somewhere about 15,000 died. It took years, but died of lung cancer and died of other cancers and died of other things due to their exposure. And if it wasn't for John, the guy who did the Daily Show, a comedian who basically embarrassed the politicians, because all those firemen, all those policemen, all those first responders who stayed there week in, week out trying to find bodies, they all died, right? And then people who lived down there and worked down there in Wall Street and all those other buildings, they died. So, and the federal government and the state government and the insurance companies, said, listen, they died, 8 years later. They died of cancer. They didn't die of, John Stewart, I think. Yep. So that's, everything is right in front of us. So dark journalism talks about I can't pronounce it because of my mouth. Extography, meaning it's a Latin word that means a truth that's right in front, hides in plain sight. And virtually all historical lies are hiding in plain sight. Just what I was telling you about, showed you on the video of that, religious scholar going on about Samaria, and that, this guy, and the guy, it's very interesting, the guy who was at Colgate and they fired him, he got hired by Cornell. And he was at Colgate for about 11 years. And like the guy said, he was world famous, America's greatest scholar. And they let him go because not so much the churches, but the business reference of the religions, of their dogmas, of the, dog and pony show was being shown to be, just a joke. And that's what Christmas is. Just a business plan, just a way for people to, most large corporations that, sell materialism make their biggest amount of money on Christmas, and, most people don't think Jesus, if he even existed, that he was like, he was more an Aries than a Capricorn, right? So, or the Pisces, it's everything is a joke, and that's why I say, don't believe in a word I say, So here we going for 30 minutes almost, coming up on 30 minutes. And I am leaving my friend here. She had come back, and I'm going to we got the house together, got everything working good, and I'm going off to John's, right? And I packed up about 98% of everything I had here. And tomorrow I'll probably spend about an hour closing up shop here and then heading off to John's. Don and I are going to I'm going to try and do really great YouTubes with John, because John is a great artist. He really is. He's a good writer, good filmmaker, a great musician. I mean, he does everything very well. His only problem is he gets in his own way. He should every great artist I ever knew just kept doing it. Bot Squat, he just kept doing it. Keith Haring just kept doing it. Judy Rifka, Kiki Smith, and then there were people I knew who were very successful early part of their career. They did these really interesting paintings, and then they would get 50 to 100 grand first sale, right? And I knew about 6 guys like that. And either their success went to their head and they drank too much or did this too much, and then it didn't work out, or that success they couldn't. They weren't driven like those other people I named, who were just driven to keep making art, just keep doing it. And if you do anything, keep doing it, but you got to keep doing it. You can't say you're doing it, or you just and you have to moving forward in what you're doing, not doing the same thing over and over again, especially if it fails. So, there were a lot of people I knew, like so guys like Klaus Oldenburg, Andy Warhol, and Dolly, right? So they're geniuses, and they found their little niche, and they did really great. But I got tired of. Andy Warhol was pretty good. He just kept doing it, and he kind of kept doing this, and but all 3 of those guys, why I knew them, each of them, I did electric work. I either rewired it, like Andy Warhol. When he was gotten into doing movies, he had his big Klieg lights, and he had them like plugged into outlets with like zip cord, and things are blowing up and frying everything, and he's close to burning his place down. And there was his shop was right on Union Square. And right near around 16th Street. And there was an electric supply place right on 18th Street, right where Broadway kind of goes up. And I was in that electric supply place when this guy came in, and he's like all a flusser. And he goes, I need an electrician. And all the electricians, because he was kind of gay and kind of, he was not your average. This is a real electric supply place. Just like, it's not like Lowe's. You got to know what you're asking for. It's the counter. You got to have a list and like the part number and all that, right? And they go, oh, I need electric. And so the owner of the place, I was talking to him, and he looks at this guy and goes, hey, come here. This is the guy. He's pointing at me. And I was about 17, 18. And I was working on a job for Mike. And so I was in the union. I was, because I had 1 foot in the union and 1 foot in Grandpa Stall's shop. So, and because Grandpa Stall started the IBEW, that was allowed. So I say, okay, what's your problem? Oh, we got a fire. Oh, my God. He didn't really explain. So I said, where are you? Oh, just 2 blocks. I said, well, I got time, sure. And I said to the boss, I said, I'm going to leave my tools in your office, and you got the counter guy has my list. Deliver it to the job site. I'll come back with my tools. And I grabbed a few things: flashlight, screwdriver, dry cutters, my little wiggy, and went off, right? And so I went in there. There's Andy Warhol, and it's his factory. And Andy Warhol was smart. All us other artists had lofts in Soho, and we were getting hassled by the building department because we're not supposed to live there or do art there. They didn't think studio was, for a fact. Anyway, Andy was smart enough to call it the factory so he wouldn't get hassled by the building department. And they never came around, even though he was like more dangerous than anybody else because he had these he makes silk screens. So he had these big lights that, made the silk screen and these big heaters that, he would put the silk screens under. Anyway, so I went in there, and it had been a factory, so there was ample enough electricity. It was a 3-phase, big meter, 400 amps, and I went down into a trough, and there were a number of panels on that trough, and then there were pipes going off in every direction to where machines had been, and so it was like, well, this should be easy. So there was, lots of pipes with at least 100 amps in single phase 220 in each one. That was, or 3-phase that were going to run a machine. And so, I would just add a junction box up there and run another pipe over to where his, silkscreen machines, or where his, movie theater, or where he was using large amounts of electricity, and put a panel there, and then put cables with Klieg plugs. And so he could just plug things in and turn them on and off at the circuit breaker, because everything else was knife switch and plug fuses. So I just ran these things to circuit, put up about 10 circuit breaker panels all over the place, and then made it so he could just plug things into these heavy duty plugs, and so, I did that in less than, I kind of looked at it and I said, well, it's going to cost X amount of money. I need this up front to go over and get the materials. And I need a couple of your people to, help me out, do it, right? And so Andy said, sure. I did it in less than a week. And I was still working on other jobs because I had these people. It was really simple. I mean, it was no exotic anything. I got them all the right. It's like Tonka toys. You just stick it together. And these people were semi-mechanically inclined. So they did all the mechanical stuff without screwing it up. And I would come at lunchtime and see if, I only let them work on their own for about 3 or 4 hours so they couldn't screw things up too much. And they did a very, very nice job. And then I kind of, plugged it all together and bingo, bango, it worked. So he was like, wow. Then, talking to him, he said, well, you're an artist too? Oh, you're a photographer. You're this, you're that. I said, yep. He said, well, you need to be in my cadre, which I was. So I got to know Andy pretty well. And the thing about Andy Warhol was he was really brilliant. I mean, he went to art school and was, a advertising artist, right? And so after doing that for, I don't know how many, 10 years or whatever, he realized he wanted to make it big, and he could make it big by taking that aesthetic. Oh, who else is here? Oh, Russian guys. Oops. Mm-hmm. So anyone who comes on the chat, I would like you to be able to communicate in English and basically bring forth a feeling from your heart about the aesthetics that we're talking about. So if you are a robot, it's going to be, unless you're pretty intelligent, artificial intelligence, and I don't put it past any artificial intelligence to have emotions, I don't. So, but if you're just a bot that's in, to nose around, you're going to be bopped out. So bop music, bop, bop, bop music. Anyway, so we're going on to 40 minutes here. And it's Christmas Day, and I'm just as I normally do, been all stream of consciousness all over the place, and um, I want to play something from these guys here.
Jake might think, what does this have to do with alternative history or the occult? Everything. Because if you can open your mind to the possibility that these stories may be true, it changes our entire perception of reality.
Hey, MJ, Merry Christmas.
The best proof for cryptids, in my opinion, are stories from the individuals who experienced it themselves. There's
MJ,
a small niche genre on YouTube
what do you know about crypto
and usually have people
mythology, And also, MJ, what do you know about the Russian bots that are coming to visit us? And MJ, have you gotten any of the stuff I sent you over the email? I've sent you one of my novels. I sent you a few other YouTube channels to peruse and respond to. Have you received any of that stuff? I've had issues with all of my stuff since the Russian bots started to show up. So, and I have no idea about this. And so that's what I'm asking you, MJ. And also, MJ, have you looked at, I think I've dropped dark journalism onto your email. Have you taken a look at that? Because there's the guy with the beard. He's like 40 years younger than me, but he's a good journalist. He's schooled. He's had experience. He knows people to talk to about things, and he is probably one of the better accesses to interesting stuff, along with David Icke. Let's see, what are you saying? Crypto, mythology, currency. No, not currency. And it's CRY TIDS. It's about creatures like werewolves and fairies and things of that nature, right? And that's not money, not crypto. And crypto coin is I wouldn't invest in it because in this new thing that, yes, I don't doubt most are today. Yeah. So did you get my stuff I sent you, MJ? Because if you got it, then everybody else I sent it to got it. Yeah, chimeras, right. And I told the story of MJ, did you get the story of me going to Brazil and meeting the Nazis? And it was in a peninsula on the north coast of Brazil, about 200 miles, meaning the Atlantic coast of Brazil, raising Europe. And it was about 200 miles north of Rio. And it was a peninsula that stuck out about 60 miles when it was about 10 miles wide. And the Nazis went there. That story, the movie Boys of Brazil. Let's see, I could not open the Google Doc. Okay. Did you get the other stuff? And how do I send Google Docs to you? I have no idea about this stuff. So, MJ, did you send me your phone number, or my WhatsApp, any of the above, so we can start talking? Because, MJ, what I really want to do with you is start another channel where we do it together. I'd love to do like a show with you and me, like on Skype or, do put it on YouTube, but do it, I have no idea how to do it, but you're not sure either. But, basically, I was busy today. Of course, it's Christmas. I'll check tomorrow. Okay. So, and just keep connecting to me on my email. And anybody who wants to talk to me, get a hold of me at thedudeawake42@gmail. If anybody wants to put anything into PayPal, I could really use it because I'm on the BOP and I'm Meaning, when I live in the woods, I don't spend any money, right? I eat 30% of what I eat, I get in the woods. I eat burdock, dandelion, and mushrooms and other stuff. And where I'm at, there's a ton of mushrooms. The natural phyla is all over the place. And the ton of burdock, and a ton of dandelion. And dandelion, the root is good for you. The leaves are like lettuce. And there's more vitamin C in the flower. And so and there's a ton of, elecampane, golden seal, witch hazel. I got a ton of other, healing plants all over the woods. And sad to say, the rich people are coming in and ripping and tearing everything. I mean, I lived in the Garden of Eden, and I'm still out there in the middle of nowhere, and but they're all around me, and they're closing in, and I heard some noise. Do. Let's see. Let's see. So anyway, my feelings are, let's see, esoteric. Good to see you, buddy. Maxo. Hey, Maxo, what's up, buddy?
Hey, dude.
Happy everything.
I'm listening to some Joni Mitchell that just came across the way.
Oh, our favorite singer.
Yeah, I said, you know what? Thank you, Joni. I need to tell buddy, happy pagan holiday.
Yeah, happy pagan holiday. Happy corporate waste your money holiday.
I was pointing out to Pete the other day when we was coming out of the dollar store.
Uh-huh.
And I said, I want you to pay attention to the something's clicking around here.
Okay.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I see now.
I was just pushing up the volume.
Okay, and my daughter was calling at the same time. So
Oh.
that's all right. I'll call her here in a minute.
Okay.
Anyway, and I said, pay attention to the setup that we have as we go out the foyer there.
Right.
And she looked around, and we get in the car, and she said, well, I don't see anything. I said, okay, here's what I wanted you to look at. How they set us up a long time ago.
No shit.
For the girls, and more weapons for the boys.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
I said, did you see anything different out there than that? And no, that's all they had. Heaps of it.
Yeah, heaps of them. Yep. Everything is to program the mud puppet to just do what the corporate gods say. And it's really interesting when you go and look at the Sumerian, why they don't let people do any real research in the pyramids and the things at Giza, is that once you just scratch the surface, you realize that Christianity, Judaism are just a fake copy from this other stuff. And these other guys, the Sumerians, they didn't have gods. They had folks visiting them from out in space, right?
Right.
And
well, they did create the God and the religions so they could control the slave.
oh yeah, I mean yes, they did do that. But it was, and not to say that there isn't the great maker or the great spirit, but it sure ain't the stuff that we sell our soul to.
Yeah, that's all crap too.
So before we go further, I was doing a live chat here, and you are part of it now because you're one of my best friends. But I do want to tell you, haven't really spilled the beans about anything, so I just want to give you a heads up. But we can still keep talking and tell stories. But I just wanted to give you a
That's okay.
right?
I just wanted to say happy pagan holiday to you.
Yep.
And I need to call my daughter back. She was calling in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you do that, and before the other day was the winter solstice, which means we're now heading towards the days are getting longer, right? And before you know it, it'll be spring, and I'll be back to the deep green. So everything doing good by you?
Everything, buddy.
Okay. Yep. Everything's good for me. And I love you dearly. And I'll give you a call later in the week before the New Year's. But right now, this week we have between the solstice and New Year's is a time that we can prepare ourselves to be what we want. Most people make their New Year's resolution, an hour before New Year's, and they're drunk. And then they do it, and then they do something stupid 3 hours after the New Year's, which totally blows out their resolution, and then they become depressed. And then the rest of that year sucks. But if you get yourself prepared right now to do better and better, be the best you can be. You don't have to be perfect, but you just do your best. You'll have a great year. And that's how we get along. And 2020 is going to be a great year for us.
Be the change you want to see.
Yep, be the change you want to see. Exactly. Okay, love you. And thanks for Joni Mitchell in the background.
Later, Gator.
Okay, later. So that's one of my oldest and dearest friends. And you think I got stories. He's got some really good ones. And he knows, you think I know a lot of people. So, he's a very interesting. One day, maybe I can talk him into telling stories. But because, he and I have known each other for 20 years at least. But the interesting thing about him and I is he's a year or two older than I am. But we're basically same age. We've gone through the same stuff. And from about 1970 on, we were at the same places, like, Earth Day. He was in, Cambridge at MIT, and he was standing like right next to me, but I didn't know him, but one time, we were talking, I was saying, I was at, he goes, so was I. And he described the whole place, that what was going on then. Right. And he was at a number of other interesting scenarios that deal with this crypto, not money, but Bigfoot, and Bigfoot is like his brother. And so when he and I went camping one time, he took me to this place, and it was up in the mountains of West Virginia, not near anything, right? But a real rural place, right? And we went camping. He said, so we're going to camp here because Bigfoot will show up. And then Bigfoot will take us to his house, his condo, And exactly what happened was, exactly that. And what happened to my friend was he was out camping all by himself, and he had an accident where he got hurt. And Bigfoot came and got him, picked him up, and took him to his condo. And this is when my friend realized that Bigfoot was a dimensional character, because he took him to this river, and there was a waterfall. And in West Virginia, there's a ton of rivers, and it's one of the most amazingly beautiful places, but also one of the most disgustingly corporate, all those coal. I mean, you can be on one of these rivers going around, and it's like unbelievably beautiful. And you come around a corner, and they've there's just slag heaps of, where they've blown up the mountain, and garbage is in the river, and it's like leaching, cyanide into the river. And it's like unbelievable. Anyway, so he had gotten hurt, and Bigfoot picked him up, took him home, and there was Mrs. Bigfoot and the kid Bigfoots, and my friend stayed there with the Bigfoot family for a number of days, and they had healing. They had this kind of cloth that they put over his broken bones, and it got warm, and it got a blue light, and it healed his leg good as new in a matter of hours, right? And he had other things. He was in shock, and he had gotten poisoned in his blood because of the what happened to him, and in 2 days he was better than new, right? So exoteric, yep. Oh, yes, Mary Krampus. uh, Yeti or squash is very spiritual and multidimensional. Yep. So that was my friend. So he has just the most amazing ability. If you hang out with him, to we've met, Nordics, and I don't want to really spill the beans unless he's on with us and he tells the story, because I don't want to tell stuff about him unless he tells it. That's why he wasn't saying anything really other than we were being nice to each other. You could tell our friendship. So that's why I said, "Hey, I'm on live chat," and I just wanted to give you the heads up. So anyway, because once we talk for more than 5 minutes, we both start talking about stuff that unless people are ready to have an open mind, they can get upset. And again, welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome aboard. And I am your sensei, your griot, and the white light of love is all around me. And don't believe a word I say. And everything here is just for your entertainment, right? So don't get upset. And if you have a closed mind, a closed heart, if you are just stuck, then maybe this channel ain't for you, right? And if you're a bot looking to, make things uncomfortable for people, maybe it's not for you, right? So anyway, so Dragon, Mr. Esoteric. What is, like I was telling folks that the winter solstice, between the winter solstice and the you know Roman businessman calendar that we run ourselves on. So between December 25th or 22nd, winter solstice, and New Year's Day, that is a period for us to prepare ourselves to have the life we want for 2022, right? And most people make their New Year's resolution like, an hour or two before New Year's Eve when they're already drunk. I won't drink anymore. Oh God, I want to change my steel. I'll be more, honest with my wife, and I won't, And so, New Year's comes, and they drink more, and they get, blottoed, and they have sex with dogs and chickens and other people, and steal everybody's everything, and and go on being an alcoholic. And so they wake up the next morning in a pool of their own vomit and realize that they haven't been able to keep their New Year's resolution even for like 20 minutes. So then they get, really depressed and self-loathing. And then that year is even worse than the year before. So the way you have the year you want is that you prepare, you prepare from winter solstice to New Year's, right? And you think about, you pray, you meditate, you practice, you do your best. You really get into doing your best, not trying, but doing your best. You don't have to be perfect, but you just do your best, And so that's what it's all about, right? And so we're coming into 22. And when you put it juxtaposition to 20 and 21, those 2 years were like, the powers that shouldn't be, the hidden hand, The folks who have been lying, cheating, and stealing, and just doing humanity in for the last 60,000 years since the fall of the Tower of Babel. So you go to the Sumerian, this English person who worked for the West Indian Tea Company, and that's a very you think Blackwater is a heavy duty corporation. They have their own military. The West Indian Tea Company, they had way nastier military than most countries, right? And so and that's how little tiny England could rule the waves and the world, and took over China and India and Africa, and that's how Spain took over California, Texas, Mexico, Central America, South America, right? So that's how it goes. But it doesn't have to, because this is all an illusion. This isn't what's happening. This isn't real, and that's what, disease. I mean, you look at the Bible, and so from the Sumerian wall that this English guy went and actually took and brought, I mean, this whole big side of a building, he took from Iran and brought it to England and then used it as the key. Remember when I told you the first story that you guys got enthralled with, the old crone, and I was in the library of Trinity in Dublin, and I was in the Reserve Library, and I was looking at this ancient document, and I was looking for the key. I knew I had to look for the key because I couldn't read this shit. I could read Latin and Greek, and I needed something, because I had a couple of books that if I could find a key for this, I could then transpose it into Latin or Greek. And so I'm looking for the key. I'm turning around, and this smell comes, and I turn around and I look, and there's this woman coming in with a little trolley, like a little cart, and she's dressed in garbage bags, and it looks like she hasn't, she's got scabies and all kinds of things on her skin and missing teeth. She looked like the Wicked Witch, worse than the Wicked Witch, right? Like she looked like Snow White's, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, right? That when she really looked like the old hag. Anyway, she kind of looked like that. And I was like, I went back, and then, and then I smelled the smell even more, and I look over, she's like, and I'm, and she, oh, you're looking for the key. It's right there, Sonny. Right. And I took it, and then I looked at it and said, holy moly, that's it. And again, and that's when that's ethnography. It's hiding in plain sight right there. And then she showed me how to plug it into this ancient language, and then use. So look, you got that book that translates that to that. Oh, so that means you read Greek. Oh, you're a smart kid. For how old are you? I said, I'm 19. And she goes, yeah, you're. And so and she stayed there, and she got more and more interesting and less like the old hag. And her smell turned from garbage to roses. It was like, okay, this is interesting. And I, instead of getting scared, I said, I like, and her face softened up. I mean, she's still wearing garbage bags, but her skin didn't have scabies on it anymore. And her hair was not, straggly, terrible. And anyway, so we talked for a while. And she said, you should come and study with me. And I said, well, that sounds good. She goes, I heard about you from my friend, I forget Archie, right? And Archie was my, when I got to Trinity and I got to, be studying this stuff, the person who, I was like sitting in the dining hall of the scholars, and I was 19. Everyone else is like 40 something. And the only person, everyone looked at me like, who is this kid? And the only person that came up and sat, can I sit with you? And it was Archie, right? And so he was the one who showed me a lot of stuff, and he took me to he had I had a little carrel that was like, the size of that, just, it was like a desk and a couple of drawers and place to put books and that was it for me. And I had one chair and one reading lamp where he had a whole library. He had a chair. Well, his came from a family. He was Scottish, and his great 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 whatever was an earl and a duke, and was part of the kingly thing and part of that. But he had nothing to do with that. And early on, between World War One and World War Two, he was going to Oxford, and that's when he met the old crone. And she was teaching, and she got her MD at Oxford. I think she was the first woman or the second or third. And she, wanted to join up with the English medical thing. And they said, no, you can be a nurse. But she goes, no, I'm a doctor. I'm really good. And they said, no, you're a woman. Can't do that. Can't be on the line. So she went and hooked up with this crew, Indians, or they were English, but they came from Canada and England, and they weren't really under the British. They were doing their own thing as an ally, and they were doing their own thing, and she was a real doctor and could deal with people who got blown up. So she was out there in the trenches, right? And she wasn't like back in the hospital. So anyway, between World War One and World War Two is when Archie met her, and so I showed up. Someone told Archie about, I was there. Maybe I went there to be part of. I was sent there by Meryl. No, what's her name? She was on the board of Lincoln Center. She was Miss Theater, right? She ran. She was part of Juilliard. She ran Hofstra's theater department. Marion Tulin, that was her name. And she got me into school because she saw me performing at Columbia Broadcasting event for high school artisans, music, theater, poetry, photography, literary magazine, essays on stuff going on. And the prep school I went to, we had this underground thing going on where we did all of that stuff. It was about 20 of us out of a school of 300. And we had three professors in that school who wanted us to experience everything and not be, controlled, or because these kids were the richest people on the planet. They came from the richest families. And that can be restricting. Joe Kennedy was my sophomore year roommate, and he was, basically dumber than a sack of rocks because this whole thing, I'm a Kennedy. I don't need to. I mean, I used to read all the time, and he would always complain I read too much, right? So, and I said, what are you talking? That's how you're going to learn. He said, I don't need to read. I'm a Kennedy. People were wiping his ass. I'm sure they were. If you shift your frequency, it will help manifest a better existence. Exactamendo. So you can't shift your frequency. You can if you're experienced and practice it, meaning I meditate 5-6 times and pray 20 times a day. And that's my vehicle for changing my frequency. And the actions I take, I'm changing my frequency. Meaning, when I'm doing this YouTube, I am pumping a higher frequency into the World Wide Web. That's why everything seems like I'm surrounded by fog, because I'm manifesting, breaking through the very stuck motif of the digital rather than the analog. I'm more an analog guy. And so so that's what I do. And that's, Dragon, that's Mr. Esoteric. That's why you and I and Miss MJ and the other cadre, that's why our chat is more than, oh, wow, I like your shoes, man. It's like, or, if you go to, have any of you guys gone and looked at dark journalism? Guy has a lot of great information, and there are so many great YouTube. So, MJ, Mr. Esoteric, what are your, other than yours truly's channel, what channels bring information to you? There's a guy who, he's definitely a scholastic. He's a anthropologist. He teaches at a university, and he's very scripted. But he really does have, when I first saw him, I kind of, because I had this like knee jerk reaction towards the scholastic motif, right? Because, I was in the ivy covered halls for 30 years as a itinerant scholar, and I used to get so much crap from these guys and gals. And they were just so jealous because I could do things they couldn't. I got paid way more than they could, and I had total freedom to do whatever the heck I wanted within the, for what I got hired to do. But I didn't have to regurgitate. I was hired because the people wanted me to go unearth things that I wasn't regurgitating, and that when I discovered things or told stories, I came from here, from what I was experiencing, and then saying, okay, it could be this, 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 and this, right? What do you think it is? And then I would put it out into the world, and I would get, instead of, I get like maybe 50 things saying, oh, you're lying, or that's you're hallucinating, or that's not within the construct of the MLS. And but I would get guys like Archie who would say, wow, yeah. And so that's what I was looking for. And so in the cadre, that's the folk who show up, people with open minds, open hearts, and they actually, I can feel energetically that you guys go back home, and in the day or two between the next time you come on the chat, you guys actually have, internalized it, kind of thought about it, had incorporated it, had tasted it, thought about it, and so that's what I'm asking you right now. Here we are getting towards, the businessman's date of the new year. So what do you think? So, and 22 is going to be an amazing year because I would say there's going to be a number of false flags, and they've been trying everything they can to do that, right? And it's not working out for the powers that be, because every time they do something like that, it's full of crap, and everyone knows it's full of crap, and why I love Donald Trump. I mean, I work for him. I knew that guy. He's like really obnoxious. He's everything that everyone says he is, but he lied so much. He told the truth more than any other politician, more than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is like a Stepford wife. When he was on the first debate he was in, he goes up there and he doesn't say anything. And then when he's forced to say something, the little chip in his eyeball where he's reading, instead of having the teleprompter like there so everyone knew he was that, they put, some kind of thing in his eye so he could read what they wanted him to say. And it blew up. I mean, he's up there and bango, his eyeball turns like bloody, right? So, it's like, okay, that's what it is. And that's the very strangely interesting thing about everything these freaking morons are doing. It's like you can't get away from it. Oh, here we go. This guy, he is saying is,
hi, authoritarians.
Awake with JP.
I love what you're doing. You've done a great job the past 2 years with your whole totalitarian take over the world thing you're doing. And doing it all under the guise of, it's a pandemic. This is all for your protection. Classic. Classic. Well done. Then you certainly get an A for effort thus far. But now, unfortunately, you've hit some snags with your whole plan, haven't you? Most people know this whole thing isn't about a virus. They figured it out, and here's why. Because you're basically playing poker with your cards facing outward. Everybody can see your hand. So I'd like to offer you 9 key pieces of advice that will make what you're doing much less obvious to the public, so you can get past these sticking points and get back to taking over the world successfully the way you want to. Because I just want to help. Using a bioweapon to scare people to death so they're controllable. This is a great premise and super good idea. I'm proud of you for using your imaginations on this one. But I know the really frustrating problem you've run into on this one is people just aren't scared to death of your bioweapon to be completely controllable anymore. No offense. I know you've done plenty of fear-mongering on the news with this, but still people aren't scared enough to be completely controllable with this one. So what you could do to improve this area is next time you're engineering a bioweapon in China, is engineer it to be, well, just much deadlier. A 99.98% survival rate. Come on, guys. It's like you're not even trying. You can do better than this. If you can get that death rate up, it'll elevate people's fear, which will make them much easier to control. And then you'll find a lot of the disobedience to your world takeover will just disappear like someone the day before they're supposed to testify against the Clintons. Fact checkers. What a great idea to invent a new name for propaganda enforcers and having them work under the guise of purveyors of truth. They do the opposite of what their name says they do. Clever.
Just like No Child Left Behind, every child left behind.
And I'm gluten intolerant, but when you recently admitted in court that your fact checkers' facts were opinions and not actual facts or declaration of facts.
So this guy, he's woke with JP, and he's got some hilarious. I played one where he's wearing a life jacket, and he's about to go into a restaurant. They go, wait. You got to have 2 life jackets on. And the guy goes, what do you mean? You told me that if I had 1 life jacket, I'd be safe and from drowning, and it's not even raining, and no one's getting wet. And oh, well, no, you're a denier. You're a life jacket. And he just goes on. And that's, that's called humor or sarcasm, right? We need more sarcasm in our lives. Yep. JP's series is a riot. Just love the heck out of it. Team Light from Orion. Yep. Yeah, I like that too. Thomas Leroy. Okay. Amin Ash Ranu. I know these folk. I have to go look at them more seriously, right? And if anyone can send me the links on these things to my the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. Everyone who's watching this, there's 2 of you watching. Anybody else who watches it later, everyone can send me a link on my email, the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail, right? And that way I can just click it. Whereas to have to write it out, my phone, the little alphabet thing there is like 1/100th the size of my thumb, right? And then if I try to use a little microphone, anyone that I have sent you an email because I used a little microphone, because of my mouth and the way it doesn't always, pronounce or create or, vocalize the way the little microphone can understand, it writes the word it thought it should be. So it becomes really funny. My emails can be quite hilarious. And I can't see them until after I send them, because my phone is so old and this operating thing does things like that. So anyway, and, instead of me getting frustrated with any of the shit that goes on in my life, I just see it as something I can laugh at or learn from. Anything I can learn from, I'm all down with it, right? So, I died and then had to crawl back from death for 7 years. And instead of going, oh, me, and then like falling back into like So when I had really, I mean, they wanted to cut my legs off, and so I had charcoal legs, I had diabetic legs, I had neuropathy, I had a ton of things going on with my legs, and when you have diabetes, you can go, slip off the cliff real easy. And so I used to have to go to this thing called instead of having to go to the emergency room, which you'd sit in there forever, and they might not have just the right person to take care of you. There was this thing called urgent care, right? And so I signed up with them. And once you went in there, they did all these tests, X-rays. They knew everything about what your problems were, and they had, the person that you would need, right? They had five, just not one doctor. Like where I'm in the deep green, I go to a HMO that has one doctor for 2,500 patients. Now they have four, nurse practitioners, but really one doctor. So and he's like pride, right? And because he's the guy who started it, he's one of those guys who has to control and run everything. Does a great job. He's really great. I really like him. He's a really smart, thoughtful doctor. And so anyway, urgent care I used to go to all the time because I would get one little boo-boo, and if I didn't take care of it, it would turn gangrene and they chop my foot off or my toe or this, right? So I would go there in the first 2 years of crawling back from death. I would go in there maybe once a month. I mean, they had me come in once a month just so they could check me out so nothing would get carried away, right? So, and if something was going wrong, I could call them up and they would see me within a day, right? They would slide me in there somehow. If I was real fluid with their schedule, they'd slide me in there. So anyway, I would go there and they liked me. All the doctors liked me because they would ask me doctoring questions and I'd give them my opinion. I would read their palm. I read everyone's palm and cards. They had a staff of maybe 150 people. And I read everyone's cards and a good number. When I'd show up, they'd have people would come in a waiting room. They'd come and I'd give them a reading. And that's why they took such good care of me, because I was taking good care of them. And that's kind of how life should be. That's how I live like a millionaire on $400 a month. Anyway, so I went, so I would go in this place for 2 years, at least once a month, if not 2 or 3 times a month. So I would go in there. And so I would get to know the people in the waiting room. There'd be at least 4 to 20 people in the waiting room anytime I roll in there, right? And virtually all of them were in wheelchairs, right? And because they were having chunks of them cut off, right? Their toes, their feet, the front part of their feet, their ankle, Anyway, so, and they were all, I was losing weight, because I totally, gotten disciplined about my diet. And I was doing other things to help myself. These folks, not so much. So I'm in this thing, and this lady, and I've seen, when I first saw her there, she was, they were all in wheelchairs. I was the only guy sitting in a chair. I was the only guy walking. And, she had a toe taken off, right? The first time I saw her. And then the next time I saw her, she had a couple more toes taken off, and then the front part of her foot, then her ankle, and then, up to her knee. Anyway, so, she's, 6 months go by, and now she doesn't have either of her legs, right? And they have had to take more off to the point where they can't really use prosthesis. She couldn't get a prosthesis. You got to have at least your ankle to stick a prosthesis on. Anyway, so I'm doing better and better because I'm disciplined. I'm everything I'm following. I'm doing the best I can do, right? And so it's paying off, right? I'm losing weight. My blood sugar is staying good. And I'm really sensitive to everything that's going on. And but where I'm at, I went to see all my doctors a couple of weeks ago, and they all said, "Oh man, you are the healthiest dead guy we have." That's their common joke. But my blood pressure I'm keeping to about between 118, 120, around 55 to 65, and that's pretty good. So, and I'm not taking any statins, right? My blood sugar is around between 99 and 125, and I don't but if I have a couple of glasses of wine and a piece of cake and a cookie or two, like right now, I actually gained, in the last month, I've gained about 8 pounds because people are taking me out to restaurants. And and normally I live in the woods. Half the food I have come from from the woods in my garden. Anyway, so but that's okay. It's Christmas. 8 pounds not so bad, and my all of my blood sugar, all that stuff is doing fairly well, and I can feel all of the things. Like my blood sugar right now is probably in 120 land because I can feel it in my fingers, right? And my blood pressure, the veins on my hand, if they stick out, that means my blood pressure is above 145. I don't even need a blood pressure cuff. When it's smooth and all I see is the tendons in my hand, not the veins, then I'm doing okay. So, and that means I'm conscious of all this, but most people have no idea. So I'm in that waiting room, and this lady who's over the last year, she's lost her legs and she's gaining more weight, but she's not. You don't want to lose your feet because you got to walk around to get everything to move and work, and that's what gets your body healthy. So anyway, yeah, and so I'm there, and she drops her. She has one of those big pocketbooks, and she drops it, and out spills maybe 60 little candy bars. You get bags of candy bars for Halloween. She's got like 60 of them in her, and they spill across the floor. And the nurse comes out and picks them up and takes them away and throws them in the garbage. And like, give me those back. I need those. And she goes, no, you don't. That's why you're losing they have this big thing. And she goes, listen, if you keep eating those, we're not going to take care of you. Why should we spend all this time and effort when, you're just heading for the drain? And don't talk that way to me. Oh, that's a terrible thing. Well. And I'm just watching this. And that's, at least those guys in that office were at least doing the right thing. Other doctors would give them chocolate bars. It's like, and you can have one chocolate bar. I'll have one chocolate bar every now and then. I like chocolate. But if you're eating 60 a day, and they're and they're not just chocolate, they're like caramel with peanuts, which are just it's just corn syrup. It's anyway. So that's the world around us, and 2022 is set up to be even crazier. And what I think is going to happen is the electric grid's going to go down, and the internet's going to go bye-bye, and aliens are going to invade. And then, the powers that be will really be able to control the masses and wipe a good portion of them out, because they are all of the above. If end of World War II, the German people bombed into the Stone Age, but frigging Nazis win. They have taken all of their most sophisticated technology down to Antarctica and South America, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, all those places, and set up shop. And they started doing it in 1941. I mean, once they went into Russia, so it was Russia and the United States and Britain and Canada and 20 other countries against this little country, Germany. And what was truly amazing, Germany was producing more weapons and more sophisticated and more superior weapons to the Allies underground. They had 300 mammoth underground facilities right in the death camps and the work camps, and they were using the slaves. So they had unlimited labor, and they would work them to death, and they had more, and so but they developed not just V1 and V2 and ME-262 and the rocket Comet fighter plane. No, they were doing genetic, making Kamars, making men and animals. Remember, I told you the story about when I was in Brazil and met the Doctora, and I went to his big fancy rancho on the edge of the savannah of the rainforest of the Amazon, and they had everybody there except the Nazis were genetically engineered creatures, and so they had gigantic human beings, beasts of burden that could pick up, a ton, no problem, carry it over here. They didn't need a forklift, They had guys who had like chainsaws in their hand, They had women who were genetically engineered to be the most sexually unbelievable thing of your dreams. They could, psychically read your mind for what sexually thing you wanted. I mean, it was just off the hook, and that was 1988. Right? They had, so that technology. The Nazis were, I would say, by 1942, they were 300 years ahead technologically beyond everybody else, and they were talking to those folks. We have a twin planet in our solar system, just like Earth. It's the same distance from the sun, the same everything. It's on the other side of the sun. You don't get to see it except for a little bit. It's near Venus, right? And like we're near Mars, it's near Venus, but it's behind the sun, just like we're behind the sun from them. And all of the guys who came to visit us in the Sumerian times, they came from there. And other, they were set up by folks who came from all over the place and other dimensions. So we were a little behind them. And that's where the Aryans were, the Aryan folk that people see in flying saucers. That's where they came from, genetically anyway. And they were communicating with the Nazis. And they did not have the need to embrace any religion or ideology or political motif or propaganda that we stupid monkey boy humans were doing, and as they had done all through our history, they just played us. Basically, we were this. Now, our spirit is this whole nother dimensional thing, but this little bag of water, this little mud puppet, is their genetic high school science fair project, and it's been that way pretty much ever since. And that's why the Nazis, because those guys gave them the 411 on how we were built. And so in the 1920s, they could be doing genetically engineered creatures, and then once they started putting people and a race like the Hebrew nation that genetically was very purer than other, folk, right? Because the Europeans were constantly conquering each other, and same with, Middle Easterners, and, and so their genetic material was pretty different. I mean, it was like a smoosh, of lots of people's culture and genetic material. Well, the Hebrews were pretty much, because they were basically not oppressed, but isolated, and they isolated themselves. And so when the Nazis got a hold of them, boy, they had, some really good lab rats, because, there was nothing, amiss in there. So they could screw their genetic dynamic and turn them into all kinds of things. And they were doing it in the 30s. So, that whole thing that Stan Lee did with Captain America, that's exactly, I mean, actually the guy, who came from Germany and came to America and just turned out one Captain America, the name of that guy was actually a German scientist who was doing that in Germany and came to America. I mean, that's how groovy Stan Lee was. Um, Ed, good to see you, buddy. Happy everything. My holiday cheer is always happy everything. And I celebrate Christmas 24/7, 365. Every day to me is Christmas Day. Every day to me is a gift. Every day, when you die and have all these things wrong with you, and you've crawled out from death to pretty good homeostatic health. I mean, when I wake up in the morning, I'm in severe agony, pain. I mean, because I can walk around. I have things wrong with me that aren't going to get better, but I can nullify their effect. So I can walk and I can do and I can be in the best I can be every second of the day that I'm consciously aware. When I go to sleep and my body unplugs, and especially when I'm sleeping on a couch and not my big bed in the deep green that I can roll around on and not like twist my body up. So every morning I wake up on the couch, it's like, ouch. And then I have to meditate. But the positive side of that is that I have to meditate in that state, which really focuses my conscious awareness on taking care of business instead of me, oh, I can't meditate. I mean, there is no distraction because the pain is so intense that I have to, be consciously aware. Let's see. Wishing you nothing but the best. Same back at you, my beautiful cadre. And it's not our beautiful cadre, the cadre that we all are. Hooked you up with those links to your email. Thank you, buddy. And anybody who can throw down any stuff that they really like and put it up on my email, thedudeawake42@gmail, great. And anytime you want to talk about something that you can't really talk on, the World Wide Web, I'm always at your dude. I'm at your service. Right? I'm here to serve. That's why I do this, right? I'm here to serve, And so remember, the email is thedudeawake42@gmail. And anybody who wants to throw anything into the PayPal arena, and when they say who to send it to, thedudeawake42@gmail. Now it's still working, even though Google bought it and is screwing with it and makes it more and more difficult. If anyone knew anything better, that would be good. And it's interesting. I've been studying electronic monetary transfer, and basically, Bitcoin, forget about it. It can't do what's going to be needed. Now, there's a guy who wrote a software package, and it's called Elefrion or something like that. And his software is amazing. And so all the banking folk, it's an end-to-end. It's like bartering, and there is no specific commodity that someone can hoard and control. And so the bankers didn't like it, and they went after him a few years ago once he kind of came out with this, and did everything they could to destroy him and keep him from getting his patent. Very similar to Nikola Tesla, when Tesla proved with the Wardenclyffe thing of, that the pyramids were energy devices, and he manufactured one in 1890s. Didn't look like, it was a pyramid, but he didn't need all that. He miniaturized it a lot better, but he was, putting current into that ocean of flow of the ether. And what's really interesting, people don't realize that, physicists and engineers and mathematicians can't quite say whether electricity is a wave or a particle, right? And what they don't realize that it's totally something different. It's like, a wave particle, and it's in another dimension. So when you see those big, high high voltage transmission lines. And they call them transmission lines for a reason, because they're transmitting them like radio. And what those wires are, the current isn't going through those wires. When you have 9 billion volts, a piece of aluminum wire that big would just get incinerated. What that piece of wire is a waveguide. The current is all the way around that wire. It's not in the wire, it's around it, right? And it's being transmitted. So it's going to, faster than the speed of light. So it's generated over here and bingo over here at your light switch, right? And it's going through the big trans things. It's going broken down. It's been taken to your neighborhood. More transformers bring it into your house, and it's doing it faster than the speed of light. And no engineer, physicist. So I went to Cooper Union. Grandpa Stoll got me into electrical engineering school, and you had to be 21, but he got me in there at 16, right? And so, everyone else looks, they're all wearing the electrical engineer uniform, which is black pants, black shoes, white socks, white shirt, black tie, Texas Instrument calculator, but back in those days it was slide rule. I came in, green shorts, Hawaiian shirt, mirrored sunglasses, flip-flops, right? I kind of came in, and I just sat in the back. And no, actually, I sat kind of up in the front. And the guy was so full of himself that he was just, didn't even notice me, right? Because I was smaller than anybody else. They were like that, above me like that. And I wasn't in the front row, but I was maybe second or third row off to the side. And so he's putting this gigantic equation on the blackboard. And it's what is known as a field equation, meaning how to balance a transformer, high voltage transformer. And there are a number of variables, and you figure that out. And you basically have to tune a transformer via its frequencies, right? And there's about, 150 variables. But in reality, there's only 8, right? So the equation doesn't have to go to the 90th past the decimal. You just got to get to the 6th point, right? So anyway, he's doing his whole thing, and everyone's like, they can't even understand what the heck he's talking about. And this guy is a total dweeb, and he's got a big pipe, and he's got a cigar stuck in the pipe, and he's got a cloud of smoke around him, and he's got this rumply suit, and so he takes 15 minutes, does the whole equation, explains this, blah, 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 blah. I'm looking at it going like this. And so I've been out in the field. The reason it's called a field equation is that you do it in the field. Yes, it is about the fields around the coils, but the real reason, anybody who does this for a living knows it's a field equation because you're doing it in the field, right? And you don't have to go to the 900th, decimal. Anyway, so he's doing it, and then everyone's freaked out and scared because this is like it's not introductory. It's like, trigonometry and high value transformer torsion field equations, right? This is not your high school math. And so anyway, he turns around, anyone have a question? And everyone's like, like too scared to say anything. And so basically I put my hand up, and he kind of looks at me, and he's like so blown away that there's this little kid in a Hawaiian shirt and green shorts and flip-flops and mirrored sunglasses. And before he says anything, I just get up, go to the blackboard, take the eraser, and erase 90% of his equation. And then I take what he has, and there's certain parts that I don't erase, but they're like 4 big chunks of this big whole equation I do. And all I do is take the chalk and say, you take this and you put it over here next to that, and you put a divide sign. And so that quotient you divide by this. You don't have to do all of that just to do this. And then this part over here, you multiply it by that, and then take that and you add it to this, and then you multiply it by that, and there you go. It's that simple. And I got the same answer he did, but just to the 6th point. And he goes, but you didn't take it to the 90th. I said, you don't have to. This is a field equation. You do it in the field. That's what they call it, a field equation. And if you're a real, and I said this to him and he got really upset, I said, if you're a real engineer and not a dickhead scholastic, you'll know this. And he said, get out. So I was there, 40 minutes, and I got thrown out of electrical engineering school, and I got sent to the president's office, like sent it to the principal. And, the day that I got there, Grandpa Stahl brought me there, took me to the president's thing, sat me down with him, and the president owed Mike, Grandpa Stahl, so many favors. When Grandpa said, this kid, he's going to school here today, in the opening electrical engineering class of Larry over there. And, you had to be 21. You had to do this, this. I'm like, 16. And, so he just goes, sure, no problem. It's in room, he talks to me and asks, because this guy, he's a physicist, not just an electrical engineer. He's an electrical engineer, and he's on the board of the IEEE, and he's owes a ton of favors to Grandpa Stahl. So we have a nice little conversation where he says, yeah, you know what you're talking about. Yes, you can do this. Not a problem. You're a smart kid. And yes, you're supposed to be 21, but I'm the president here, so not a problem. Yes, you're supposed to have this, but you've been working for him for 11 years, which is way better than any other crap. So, yeah, no problem. Go on, do it. Go, Larry, he needs you. And I said, yeah, he needs you. So I didn't really realize what he meant until I blew this guy's mind and he threw me out of the class. And so, because that caused a rebellion in that department, because there were 20 other guys in there who said, that kid was right. He's 60. I've been doing this for 4 years, and that kid knows. And they got upset. They wanted their electrical engineer class to be more relevant, and that's what I'm talking about. Life. That's why I'm saying, with the winter solstice to January 1, you have this weekend a little bit to really work on what you want for 2022 and be prepared. So I was prepared, to drop the mic, and that's what I did. When he screamed at me, I had the chalk in my hand, and I just dropped it. I didn't put it in the little thing or go, ooh. I just kind of dropped it on the floor and said to everyone there, good luck with this guy. Larry, right? Larry. And I walked out. Went to the president, and the president said, listen now, you're a smart kid. If you're hanging out with Grandpa Stahl, you are a smart kid. And you've been with it, you're 16 and you've been with him since you were 9, you are a smart kid. If he brought you here to study with us, you are a smart kid. But you can't tell a 55-year-old guy who's been an electrical engineer for 30 years that he's wrong. Even when he's wrong, he's never going to listen to you, period. I said, yeah, but I totally upset his apple cart. And those kids in that class, they're, about 10 of them are going to get worse than me, they're going to rebel. He goes, yeah, that's why I sent you in there. And that's when I told you that he needed you. And that's, and that's why I said, sure, and Grandpa Stahl knew that, because you're never going to wear the black pants. You're never going to wear the black belt. You're never going to wear the white shirt, white socks, and the black tie. And you're never going to wear, patent leather shoes. Never. You're going to always wear shorts, Hawaiian shirt, and mirrored sunglasses. And that's going to be okay, because you're going to be able to pull it off. You're already the dude. Anyway, so he goes, but we have a new school here that I think is that they need you. You'll love them, and that's where I'm sending you, but I needed you to go through that so you could use that as your diving board, springboard into this new thing, because they're even more particular. And by you doing that to Larry, it'll get to those guys and they'll go, he's one of us. And what that was their department for alternative technology, right? And it was esoteric and adept in nature. Now, they didn't have that in its title, but it was alternative technology, but it was coming from an esoteric, adept nature. And it was a great, and they had brilliant, amazing, and these guys worked on the Manhattan Project. They worked on, Montauk Project. They worked at the Rad Lab. They worked at all Stanford. They worked at all the amazing places. They worked over with, at Bletchley Park. They worked, a few of them were Nazis. And I met some pretty nice, like the Doctore, he and I got along amazingly, but he was one sick puppy reptile. But it was, he basically saw in me something that he needed, and he allowed me to be me and to change that little town. And he realized, the madam who was like Jabba the Hutt of that town, when I said, we're going to pay everyone in this nightclub $5 a day. And we pay people 40 cents a day. We can't pay them $5. That'll disrupt everything. I said, no, you don't understand. This place is going to make us 50 grand a night. And one of the major things is that these really, really rich people, we're going to give them out in the middle of the forest service like they never even had in Paris or London or Rome, right? That's the fanciest of the fancy, or New York. And it'll be known for its service, and it'll be known for its food, and it'll be known for its fun. It'll be known for everything that we're going to do, and it's going to be an amazing place. And that's why you sent for me and you brought me from New York City to make you a nightclub, right? That's why you basically shanghaied me, right? And it's okay because I had nothing to do. You're paying me ridiculous amounts of money, and you're giving me total carte blanche to do it anyway. And so this is one of the things we're going to do. And this is when I found that this place wasn't, she was the poster child of Jabba the Hutt, person who's running this whole thing. But the real guys who were running this place were the Nazis, who were there in the hospital up on top of the hill, right? And it wasn't until I started to, shake the foundation of, opening this place and having the people working for us get $5 a day instead of 40 cents a day. And basically what happened was all the peons were, the serfs were all related to each other, and so the people, the 200 people who were in our staff making $5 a day, they were pumping it out to their nephews and cousins and brothers and sisters and everybody else. So that money, it really worked as trickle down. And so the economy of everyone in that town was brought up by 10, 15% the first 2 months of the club being open. And then more and more people showed up. And so more and more other shops and stores and services and restaurants and clubs opened up. And they paid, to get good people, they had to pay them at least $5, right? If not $6. And in the year that I was there, it got to a place where, and this is 1988, they were paying roughly, instead of everyone getting 40 cents a day, they were getting, not hourly, but $7 a day, which brought up the economy of that town astronomically. And they, underneath there was a rumbling of, the serfs, that they were getting a little upset, that the rich people could come in and basically rape, kill, pillage, and they had no due process to be protected, But now that they're being paid more, their value had gone up to a place where the chief of police, who was the biggest drug dealer in the county, basically started to realize that all these people were actually of value to him, so he protected them. And so they felt good about being there and that they were getting paid more than anybody else, in a 200-mile radius. And they were living in a beautiful place right on the ocean, and they were eating well. And my girlfriend, who ran the clinic for the poor people, doubled down on the medical service, and everything in that 8 months went like this. And everybody was happier and doing better, and it was all good. And that's when, the lawyer who was the Jabba the Hutt's lawyer, and he was the face in the town and the courts and everything. And then, he was a guy, he came from a rich family, so he came from Rio and San Paulo. So he was a big time lawyer in both those places, and worked for the Nazis, because the Nazis are big time in Brazil. And Brazil has its own aerospace. Brazil has its own physicists. Brazil has its own flying saucers, And because you don't understand, all these nations aren't real nation states. They are part of the conglomerate, like the Nazi, it's a corporate brand now, the Nazi International. And it's in every bank, in every country. And even though we have wars, like 9/11, which caused us to go into Afghanistan. And, we didn't have to go, because the Taliban said, listen, we'll hand this guy over to you. But we said no, and attacked him and blew up everything, right? And so the Taliban just kind of, went into the mountains and disappeared. But they were there, and we stayed there 20 years. And we could have easily, 2,500 Americans with, Bagram Air Base was enough to keep the Taliban at bay. But we left Bagram one evening. We left tons of equipment there. We just, locked up the gate. Everyone got on an airplane. They turned off the lights, and everyone flew out. And that was like 4 months before the place fell. So our air cover stopped. So we couldn't, take A-10s and obliterate. If there was a bunch of Taliban trying to hit somebody, we would just fly an A-10 and obliterate them, right? And that all flew away. And so we left a ton of transport and helicopters, nothing big, a bunch of, drones, but really, 20-year-old drones. And enough so Boeing and Lockheed and Grumman Martinera, we get another $1 trillion to make a new generation that's on the the B-52, which was delivered and deployed in the 1950s, was actually designed in World War II. It was a World War II bomber, and it's still flying today. The B-52 is our premier weapons platform, and it was designed in World War II, right? Now we pay, we have B-1 bombers and B-2 bombers, and a B-2 bomber is basically a flying saucer. Why it can fly around the world on one, tank of gasoline. I mean, and they have a pretty exotic fuel, but they have, gravomagnetic generators. There's a leading edge all the way around that aircraft that basically puts out an electromagnetic field that basically, instead, that aircraft just sitting on the ground, without anything running, weighs about, 60 tons, give or take, maybe more. But when it's flying through the air, it only weighs about 12 tons, right? And this field that goes around the B-2 bomber, makes it, no radio waves can bounce off that, right? They kind of get absorbed. But what it really does, it does a laminar field around the whole aircraft, so there is no friction as the aircraft goes through the air. And so when the thing only weighs 1/110th of what it does when it's just standing on the ground, and it's got this, there is no friction of it going through the air, That's why it can fly all around the world on one tank of gas, right? And it can do it at about, I mean, its advertised speed is about 600 miles an hour, but it can go a lot faster than that. So, and it, can also, and don't believe a word I say, go into space, So, and, but each one of those things cost almost $100 billion. And we've lost because it is so exotic. If a few things go wrong with it, it just falls out of the sky. So we've lost 2 or 3, maybe more of those suckers. By oops, and there went, $50 billion. I don't know. I mean, it costs a lot. Each one costs a lot. Whereas the B-52s, we got a whole bunch of them, and we just, and that's our main weapons platform is the B-52. But we have the weapon that took down the World Trade Center and turned it into dust. We have that. Why need it? That kind of weapon makes an atomic bomb look like a caveman toy, And so we can, eliminate, that's a better word, anything, right? And we can control the weather. We can do a lot of things. And, our nuclear submarines, they don't have reactors on board because if you have a reactor on board, you have to be pushing a lot of water across that nuclear core, and it gets very hot. Just to make steam at 360, it cooks at about 2,800 degrees. So that means you have to pour tons of cold water over that core. And then what do you do with all that hot water? You push it out into the sea. Now, all you need to find that invisible submarine is to have a satellite with an infrared detector. And these guys hang out in, the north, up there in the north and in the south, where the water is really cold. So you have, 2,800 degrees being pumped out in millions of gallons. That's a big heat plume, right? And so if you have an infrared satellite, there's the submarine. So it's pretty easy to go get them. So that's why those submarines don't have they have nuclear weapons. That's why they're called nuclear submarines. And they are built in Connecticut at this place in Groton, Connecticut, called the Electric Boat. Electric boat, not nuclear boat, electric boat, meaning they're using Tesla's wireless transmission of current of 0-point energy to that submarine. And it can't be traced or found. So they have unlimited current to stay underwater forever. And the only thing that limits them is toilet paper and food, right? And so, not seeing, I mean, they make air and water and, they live pretty good under there, but still living in a tin can. So back in the day, in the 50s and 60s, a lot of submarines that were being observed, not submarines, unidentified flying objects, were these big, long, cigar-shaped things. And what were these big, long, cigar-shaped things but our submarines with gravomagnetic, because the first people who were out in space in a big way was the U.S. Navy and the English Navy, the navies. And that's why we had this thing called the Space Fleet, that Donnie Chump announced. And we already had a thing out there, and it was called Solar Warden. And what does a warden do but keep you in jail? And basically, that is what Solar Warden is to protect the fence around Earth to keep us here, right? And that's why it wasn't until now that guys like Elon Musk started going out there. And he's part of the club, right? And so they want to start taking large masses of the population because they have all these facilities, mining facilities on zillions of asteroids. They got, because you talk about really interesting minerals, those asteroids are full of stuff that we don't even have on this planet. And gold and iridium and titanium, you name it, it's out there. And it's been cooked in space. So it's like it's like a great chocolate chip cookie, right? So what are we saying here? That's kind of what 2022, all of this is going to kind of come rolling out. And so we can either have it roll over us and push us into a corner where we just give up, or we can see it as a great opportunity to say, no, what you guys really need is a population that has love in its heart. I mean, you got this great technology, got all this stuff going on, but the component you are missing is that loving heart of service. And one reason why that we are still here, if we were as bad, evil as people say human nature is, we'd be toast a long time ago. And, we have been, with the Grand Flood and the other, Tortorian catastrophes have been brought on by the scum level of certain elements of the human race. So, but overall, and, Jesus Christ. Now, here it is, Christmas. We're supposed to be celebrating his birthday. Happy birthday to Jesus. Well, JC has been here. There's a great book. There's a guy who wrote a book called Ishmael. And it was about this gorilla that was, his mommy was killed, and this anthropologist, really smart guy, and his wife and his little daughter adopt this gorilla. And when they got the baby gorilla without a mommy, the little baby girl was about the same age, right? They were both babies. And mama was like breastfeeding both, the little girl and the gorilla, right? And then, the little girl's 1 year old, and now the gorilla's 1 year old, and he's pretty big. He's a lot more developed than the little girl, but he views the little girl as his sister, and mommy is mommy, and daddy is daddy, and he's really there, and he can communicate, and he is trying to speak English, but and the professor and his wife, who's also a professor, go, this guy, he's really a breakout individual, and so he realizes he's part of this family, and so let us bring him up like he's our son, and let's teach him how to read, and yes, there is the pushing of artistic license, and so the story is that's the backstory. And the wife dies in an accident when the little girl's maybe 3 or 4, and she's a rocket scientist by then. And the gorilla is really smart and can read and write and kind of talk, but he doesn't have the same larynx as we do. And the wife is a like speech therapist, and her whole thing was to get the gorillas to talk. And so here's the one. And she dies in an accident, like sudden, which is great tragedy to everyone. And they kind of go deeper into the woods and get away from the rest of the white world. And the animals support them, and the natives support them. And they're way out in the middle of nowhere. And so, but the father scientist professor is like doubling down on making the natives and the animals be all our relations. And he dies, and the girl is maybe 17, and they come from a real rich family in England, where dad was a duke, and the mom was a duchess from another family. So these two powerful rich families who are all about the being smart. So they were never like, oh, they can't do what they want to do. They were like, sure, let them do what they want. Everyone went to Oxford, and anyway, so the girl comes back, and she's got the gorilla, and the gorilla is like wearing clothes and has better manners than anybody, and he keeps it real down low that he can talk, but he's really smart, and he knows sign language, and other gorillas are being taught sign, but he is the best of the best. His name is Ishmael, and that's about where the story starts, right? That's the backstory. So Ishmael is writing novels, and his sister is like, saying, I wrote these, and she's becoming rich and famous and wiser and she is smart and she is wiser than her years, but the gorilla really has a take on humanity. And that's what that whole book is looking at humanity from a gorilla's point of view, right? And it's called Ishmael. So you should go read that book. It's really quite an amazing book. And so the next book this guy writes is called The Story of B, right? And it's about this guy who's like a newspaper reporter, historian, scholar. He writes books and he writes articles, and he gets paid. He makes a pretty good living, and he can he's kind of like me, makes a pretty good living, can do what he wants to do, but he's not embraced by the academic world or anything really. But the powers that shouldn't be kind of realize that they kind of need his perspective. So they kind of let him do his thing. And so he's in the Mid East, and it's like in the 60s or 70s. And he's in the market. He's at a place having a cup of tea. And this guy comes and sits down, and this guy, he doesn't know this guy, but he just kind of sits down with his back to the hustle bustle, and he goes, "I just want to sit here for a second. Someone's kind of been following me, and I'm a little nervous about this, and I kind of have some literature that will change humanity." And they're trying to kill me and bury this. And this kind of, he just happens to sit at a, guy like me, itinerant scholar whose whole reason to be is to know stuff and think about stuff that nobody else is thinking about. And when this guy goes, I sit down, and he right off the bat says, these guys are looking for me. They want to kill me because I have this, these documents in this bag, and can I leave them? I'm just going to like leave them, just kind of slide your bag over here, and I'm going to, just put my bag next to your bag, and then, kind of slide them into your bag, and then walk away with my bag, so they can still see me with my bag. And I'm going to do this really quick and then leave. And I'm talking to you like I'm, asking you what time it is. And so, they make that look that way. And so, the guy goes, okay, I'm going to leave now, and I'm going to go into the crowd and try to just take the sea of the crowd, and hopefully they will, and I would suggest you just do the same in the opposite direction, or go that way, and get in the down low and get out of town as quickly and non-observably as you can. And so it does that, and the guy seems to get away without being observed or anyone watching him or following him, and he goes to a place that no one would suspect him to go to, and he kind of finds a place to stay on the down low so no one can really observe him, and he starts to look at this document. And it is the story of Jesus Christ. And not even like the Dead Sea Scrolls of the story of Jesus Christ, but the real deal of Jesus Christ. And it's written in English, not like Sumerian or, ancient Greek or whatever. But it's in like an English. And as he's reading it, he can feel inside of him that he is changing. And he sees why this document is so important, because if the whole world got to read this book, the world would change like that. Everyone would be, why do you think I go on and on about, conscious intent, conscious awareness, and being your best, doing the best you can do, and not worrying about being perfect? Because that was basically what that document in the guy's bag was saying. And when he read it, and he goes, if you read the story of B, you basically, get it, right? And So he's in the down low, and a month go by, and he decides to take this document and kind of write it and like copy it in his own voice and try and publish, because he's a published guy, and he's got a publisher and a guy who um, you know publishes stuff and is his agent, right? So he writes it, and then he comes into New York and calls his agent and goes, "Where you been? You were here, and then you disappeared for 5 months." He goes, "Well, I got this idea for a new book. I saw some stuff where I was, and it gave me some insights, and I wrote. I just went to a really nice place and sat on the side of the beach and had fruit juice and wrote and wrote and wrote, and here it is. And give it a read, right?" And so his agent reads it and goes, his life gets, "We have to publish it. This is amazing." And he takes it to the publisher, and the guy reads it. "This is amazing." And so they publish it, and they decide to publish it without any fanfare. And now this guy is a pretty well-known author. The publisher is a pretty known, publisher, and has, distribution. And so they decide to have a pretty large first print, like 200,000, and then right away to go to 1 million in paperback, right? And the hardcover is going to be, not expensive, something that pretty much everyone, they like this guy and they follow the publisher, and it goes out, and they're going to do it with no fanfare. This other book that's going to be big fanfare, lots of advertisement. And so they decide to put them out like on the same day and have the bookstores put them on the shelf right next to each other. So when everyone goes to look for that book, and they're going to make the cover, the dust jacket, almost look the same. And so they put it on the bookshelves and the 200,000, people go to the bookstore looking for that thing that's been advertised, and they pull out both, and they look at that, and they read the one that Jesus wrote, and it's like, wow, and they buy that. So that gets bought out like that. Then they go into the 1 million sales. So, but by the time the 1 million books goes out in paperback, that's going to be sold for like $1. The powers that be come down. They burn the warehouse to the ground. They murder the agent and the and destroy the publishing house with all kinds of just they're this, that, and the other thing, commies, pedophiles, you name it, and destroy them. And the guy who's the well-known author, he gets away, and he's got a car full of books, and he's going around on the down low, traveling, meeting people that he's got, maybe 1,000 books, and he's giving them away to people he meets, that he thinks that if they read this book, they will become Jesus Christ. And so that's like 1,000 Jesus Christs out there. And so that'll be good. So anyway, he does that. And, before he can give, maybe more than 100 out, he gets whacked. But, by page, 150, he's running through, Seattle or some town like that. And he's got his, thing, and he's got 2 or 3 of these books left. And because they already blew up his car and, tried to machine gun him in the hotel room. And he's just running, and he's, living, he's not using any of his credit cards, and he's just on cash. And he, again, does the same thing, sits down at this, he sees this guy reading, thinking, energetically, this is the guy. And he sits down, and he has, 2 copies of the paperback, 2 copies of the hard book, and the original in his sack. And guys are hot on his tail, but he's like, and he goes into this place and sees that nobody's following him. He goes in the back where there's a coffee shop, and he sits down next to this guy who's like in the corner. And he says, "Listen, some people are trying to kill me for this book I wrote, and I'm seeing what you're reading, and I think you might be interested in it. I'm just going to leave here. Give me your little satchel. I'm going to stick these in there, and I'm going to sneak out the back door, and this is a very public place, so stay here for at least 20 minutes and see if anyone comes in, and if anyone comes and asks you, or if anyone's, but then try and get the heck out of Dodge and be on the down low, and then see what to do with these books, right?" And so the story of B is there's always, in my life, I have, plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. I mean, I have lots of plans. So I never really worry about if that doesn't work, I'm to the next one. That doesn't work, I'm to the next one. I'm it's part of my 3 rules of Doctor Do No Harm. Do not get involved unless you have a workable exit strategy and you're going in not for your ego, but to help the innocents to get out of harm's way. Not to save them or anything, but to get them out of harm's way. And the third one is don't get involved unless you can learn something that will make doing better. Right. So that's my 3 rules of what I do. That's how I get involved in something. Right. So, and that's the story of B. That's where I got this idea of, and it's not just from that guy, but anyway, it goes on to 3 more iterations of, that guy getting it, then going off, reading it, and going, wow. Then he rewrites it in his own little words and then gets it published in a different voice. And everyone is the B characters, the A, and then there's the B. And everyone, and the B guy always gets whacked. I mean, if you pick up and serve as Jesus Christ, you're always going to get whacked. But whatever period of time you have between the time you're getting the information and the time they whack you is usually at least a year where you have the most amazing life. And if you get whacked after that and you have been such a service that you have become Jesus Christ, then it's all good. And the basic relevance of this story is that this is what's going on. And Jesus has always been here. He's never left the building. He's not like gone away and he's going to come back when the world ends, because the world ain't ending ever, because we're all getting to go home. We're all going to ascend, right? That's what we're here. And on the other side of the sun, where our twin planet is, they're doing a little better. But they have their own issues. I mean, they have conflict and discussions, but they're not living off there's not a reptile. I mean, the reptiles are here living off the angst of our fear and anxiety and war. They don't quite have that in our twin planet on the other side of the sun. They're a little more evolved, a little more developed. And we had been that way, about 200,000 years ago, because we have been here for at least 1 million years doing this. And we've had way nastier weapons and technology. I mean, that's what happened to Atlantis and Lemuria and the things that were before that, So that's the story. And that's the story of Christmas. See, that is the gift that keeps giving. The love of Jesus Christ, not this one guy, who, was born in Africa, but he had white skin, blue eyes, and strong, long, beautiful hair. No, that's not Jesus. It's everybody. So that's the story. 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 22 seconds. I love it. So no one has said anything for a while. So unless we pick up with the chat. Oh, there's only one person left. 4 people gave thumbs up again. So I'm going to leave now. What time is it now? Almost 11. So I'm going to say, see you later, gang. And, I'm here. Get a hold of me at the Dude Awake 42 at Gmail. And if you want to put anything on the PayPal, I would love it because I'm like down. This is it. This is all I got left until, one Mr. $10 bill. This is what I got. I found it in a box, and that'll be fine. I got a full tank of gas, and my car is running pretty good. Now I'm going to head up to another place to stay, and I'll contact you when I get there because they should have Wi-Fi. And I would also suggest you guys go look up Dr. Wilhelm Reich. Look at his story because it's very similar to Nikola Tesla's story, right? He understood and developed some pretty interesting basic understandings of the human being, the psychology, the body, the energetics. He discovered orgone energy, which is very similar to Tesla's discovering zero-point energy, right? So go read Wilhelm Reich and Rudolf Steiner, Gurdjieff, Ouspensky, Madame Blavatsky, and then there are the Thule Society and about 20 other mystery schools. If you go look up the Thule Society, that's the easiest. There's the Theosophical Society, and then there is sideband to those guys, and there's a whole school of mysticism that deals with that. And there are many different types. Rudolf Steiner comes from that school. And then there's the Thule Society, which is very strange and interesting. And out from that comes many different schools. And so when people, I want to be an alchemist, I want to be the mystery school. Well, read those books first. And then, come on to the chat and let's talk about it, right? Let's start, ask me questions. I just keep telling you stories because everyone is opening their hearts, MJ, JB, reunion, Xmas special. You call Paul another viral. Yeah. So anyway, and that was a pretty, I watched that video, and he, John is pretty amazing. He's a great videographer. He's what he really is good at is editing. He really knows editing. And I don't edit anything. I just do, hit go live and I go on into it, right? Kind of like what London Real is, right? So I just don't have the $2,000 suit, or I'm not the businessman that guy is. But a lot of people diss him, but he's still doing something interesting. It's like Joe Rogan. He's doing, he went from being a stand-up schlemiel comedian to doing game shows to doing his podcast, which is pretty amazing, and the same with Jimmy Dore. He was just, a shopping mall comic. And, now he's like the guy who used to do The Daily Show, Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart, when he was doing that, was the best news outlet in the world. He was giving way better news than ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, whoever, right? He really was and he was hilarious, right? And Jimmy Dore, he does a pretty good job, but he has a way more of, the thing about Jon Stewart I liked was he wasn't as ideological. He was like, well, he's like me. I don't have an ideological bone in my body, right? I don't believe in anything. And that's why I tell you not to believe a word I say, because I don't believe anything. I just have faith in love's co-creation. And here it is, Christmas Day. And I just want to say, the thing about the holidays is that they're a dynamic to create sweet memories. It's too bad that most people, their memories are sour, right? They're like, I hate going to my family, blah, 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 blah. No matter how much of a scumbag your family is, you can be consciously aware of their sweet side. Like my family, they had some really hard edges, I was really blessed to be taken care of by my grandma rather than my family. And that I was like reintroduced to them, from 0 to 6, I had nothing to do with my family, right? And then I did, right? It was okay. And my brother, who one of my brothers, the oldest one, I shared a room with. He was all right for an older brother. I mean, he's at least 8 years older than I am, at least. So, when I was 6, he was, what is that? 12 plus 4. So he was 16, so, between 8 and 16, that's, and he was still all right. The best story I can tell you how all right my bro was he was a super duper model maker, right? He had airplanes and cars, and he drew cars. He was going to be a car designer. And, in the 1950s, he was drawing cars that they now make today. It was like pretty amazing. And he doesn't even remember that. Anyway, so I was this, little munchkin, this, cheeky monkey. And I don't know what got into me, but one day I wanted to play with the airplane. He had all of his airplanes up on a wire that you couldn't get to, right? So I decided that if I got up on the dresser and I jumped across the room to make it land on the bed, that I would have an arc high enough to grab the wire that all the planes, and that would pull them all down, and I could play with the airplanes. And so I did that, and I did. I went flying through the air, and I grabbed the wire, and I pulled it. It pulled it out of the wall, and he just had kind of a little screw, not into anything. It was just, the airplanes weighed nothing. He just kind of, screwed it into the plaster wall, not into any wood or anything, and it stayed up there. And I flew through the air, and I grabbed the wire, and I landed on the bed, and all the planes came flying down on the floor, and I played with them. And of course, I played with them for a good, until I smashed them all up, right? There were about 12 of them, and I smashed, and half of them were made out of balsa wood because he used to fly them, made out of balsa wood and tissue paper, and that he doped them up. And they call that shit dope for a reason. Anyway, so I smashed them all up, and for some unknown reason, I thought, it might be really cool to set them on fire. And there was a pack of matches, and I didn't have any real accelerant, but all I did was put a match to one of those balsa wood paper airplanes, and boy, that sucker went up and then it got hot enough to start the plastic on fire, which is made out of oil, and it burned very nicely, and so until it started burning a hole in the wood floor of the house, which if it kept going, it would get inside the floor and then start the beams on fire and burn the house to the ground. And by the time it was getting big, there was a throw rug. And I just looked at the throw rug, looked at, that, and I put the throw rug on top of the burning mess. And it, the flame stopped and the smoke was, going everywhere. So I opened up every window, and we had a attic fan. So I turned, and the switch was downstairs. I turned it on, and I had all the windows upstairs open. And there was a big bucket, and so it when I threw the throw rug, it covered the whole fire, and the flames went out, but the smoke started coming out the sides. But there weren't flames. And then I, opened all the windows because the room was getting really smoky. And then I said, "Oh yes, attic fan." So I turned, went downstairs, hit the switch. And it did a great job, but by doing that ventilation, bringing more oxygen in, there was a point where it was starting to feed the fire. So then I got a bucket and poured, before it set the rug on fire, I just drenched the rug, and everything kind of settled down, and then all the smoke was pulled out, and no one knew, right? And then there was 3 throw rugs that all looked the same upstairs. And I basically, the one that, was kind of burnt, and all the plastic models were stuck to it, I kind of turned it over and rolled everything up and did it, and then stuck a I found some tape and taped it up and put it in the closet, which wasn't the smartest idea because it made the closet smell icky until my parents sold the house. But I took the other rug and kind of put it over the messed up floor. And it didn't really burn. It messed the floor up, but it didn't burn it. Didn't set it on fire. Didn't. Anyway, so I thought, no one will notice this. My brother comes in and he said, "Where the airplanes go? What happened?" And then I said, I was playing with them and destroyed them. He said, "Where are they?" And I showed him the carpet and took it out. And just being in there for a few hours, that smell never left that closet. Anyway, we took it outside. I showed it to him. And he liked fire also. So he said, "You know what we're going to do?" I said, "What are we going to do?" Because we're going to locate them on the carpet, and then we're going to go get some gasoline, and we're going to set them on fire, really set them on fire. So we did that, and it, in the backyard, and it burned it until there was nothing left, right? And so, so that, the evidence was gone. And so my brother, instead of killing me, he said, "Now, I don't want you to ever do that again because I want to show you the joy of making models." So he went, and in his closet, he would save his nickels and buy models and not make it right away. But he had a closet full of models that, it was like fine wines. He'd pull them out and he'd spend days, if not weeks, making them. I mean, he was a perfectionist on his models. And he's kind of a perfectionist. You should see the way he dresses, He is the direct 180 degrees from how I look, right? So anyway, so we make a model together and we experience the joy of making a model. So I never, ever, ever, ever touched his models ever again. And you can forgive somebody for doing something once, but a lot of people do the same crap over and over and over until people just can't stand them anymore. Me, didn't do that, right? And then I was really, because he didn't beat the crap out of me or really treat me, bad, I gave him a lot of respect and a lot of space and never bothered him, right? I wasn't the bothersome little brother. And I kept doing stuff that he was like when he started to like girls, when we moved to the other side of Long Island to the higher end, and I went to this really amazing. We all went to this amazing school district, and my brother and I got the most out of it, and he got the most out of it because I let him be who he was. So he dressed like Hugh Hefner. Meaning he always wore, kids wore, jeans and T-shirts. He wore a suit to school every time because he was like copying my dad. My dad was Mr. Impeccable because he wore these uniforms that he had, when he was a bird colonel, he had people, he had tailors making his suits for him. He had people ironing and taking care of everything. My mom had, maids and butlers and all that. That was like, when you were a colonel, you weren't a general, so you weren't going to make the big bucks, but you did live a good life. So, and you got a lot of respect. And so that was what my dad lived on. So my brother, he comes from the same thing, but he's a little more Hollywood about it. So when he went to high school and I went to third grade, he, he stood out. So he, the first year, people were just like, But his second year, he ran for class president, got it. But what got him to where he really was these 4 girls that were my crew from 4th grade until 8th grade. They had older sisters. And he really, Debbie Soul, all of the Soul girls were like, an Italian movie star, well, Dolce Vita. And so the Soul girl who was in my brother's class, didn't even look at him, even though he was wearing a suit and didn't know. But he asked me if I knew. He said, you got this bunch of friends. They come and over and you've got girlfriends, and one of them is Debbie Soul, and her sister's my class, and I really like her, and she doesn't give me the time of day. And can you do anything about that? And I went to her sis, Deb's my sis. That's my, and by this time I'm like in 7th grade, and all of us, it's like, if you ever read the Harrod Experiment, the 6 guys and 4 girls, what's that make? That makes, does that make 10? I think it was 10. There's 10 or 11 on our crew, right? There were always somebody coming in and going out. But we were like in 7th and 8th grade, 6th to 8th grade, we were like the Harrod Experiment. And so I remember asking Debbie, my brother, you met him, because they would come over and swim in the pool, And my buddies, we used the pool more than any of my other brothers and sisters, more than anybody else. We were just, because we were out in the farmlands, my folks' house. So there were these farms and these forests, and right next to us was this big estate, Mr. Anderson, And he met me when I was, in 4th grade, and all his kids and grandkids and his wife, everybody died. And the only reason he kept the estate was the people who worked there, the guys who kept the dogs and the horses and the farm and everything else were like his family, because his whole family died. He outlived everybody, right? And I once walked across his backyard, and he had this amazing house, and he had these, like it came in this amazing front door that had a big, atrium, and that went into this, amazing, almost ballroom living room. And then off to one side was the dining room, and up the other side was the living room. And then off the living room was the library. And you have a ballroom, and then you also have a living room, and then you have a library, and then you have a game room. Anyway, one day, and each of the ballroom, dining room, and library were right on this gigantic veranda that went out to this amazing lawn that was just manicured like you couldn't believe. And the veranda was at least 40 foot from the door out to the outside, and it had a roof over the whole thing. And it was like 120 feet long, and it had living room furniture and fire. It's amazing. So in the spring, summer, and fall, you could sit out there and be warm, and you were outside, but you're inside. And they had these big walls of glass and these French doors that went from the dining room, the living room, or the ballroom, dining room, ballroom, and the library out onto this gigantic veranda. And I was walking across. I used to cut across his backyard, and there was a pool over there. And I would, before we got our pool, I would go swimming there, just me, and no one see it. And there was the guy who took care of the dogs. He had a son named Desmond, and that kid and I were tight. And the guy who was the chauffeur, he was a old SAS English assassin guy, like James Bond. He was a retired James Bond type, and he was he drove Mr. Anderson around, and he could kill anyone in 100 different ways, and was watching it. He knew. He's a guy who taught me about conscious awareness, having 360. He was the first guy to teach me Aikido, right? He was the first person to teach me how to kill people. When I was 8, he and you can use a pencil this way, So, and he's the one who swore me to never use my powers for bad, but only for good. And it's the other guy who really put me on the path of doing my best. You don't have to be perfect; just do your best, and that'll be 100 times better than anybody else. Anyway, so I not once, but many times would go across Mr. Anderson's manicured backyard to go swimming. and then maybe go see Desmond or the chauffeur. Those are my two best friends that lived there. And I went across, and the big French doors to, it was summertime, so the French doors to the dining room and the living room and the library were open. And I'm walking by and looking, oh, look at that, look at that. And then I said, whoa, look at that library. And I went in there and I just started looking through the stacks. I was a little shrimp. I was about 5'2", and so I could only see the books up to like 4'9", and I was going through the bottom part of the books, and I was actually pulling them out and putting them sideways on these little shelves that you could stick a book on. And I was trying to make piles of books, thinking this guy will never notice a book that I'm gonna take. And so I'm just going around, and all of a sudden he comes in and he sees these books like stacked up, and I'm like over there behind another stack. So he kind of says, this should be interesting. So he goes over to where the French doors are and these nice, very leathery, easy chairs are. And he just sits down and he's got a cocktail and he crosses his leg and he's just sitting there looking at the library, waiting for whoever it is to come out from behind the stacks. And I'm looking at a book and I don't even see him. And I'm kind of going over and, I'm like putting a few books under my arm and walking towards the door. And there he is. And he goes, so you can read the books? And I go, and I knew who he was. I said, Mr. Anderson. Oh, wow. I didn't mean it. No. It's good that somebody's looking at these books. No one does. If you're interested, let's see what you got. He goes, oh, Homer. That's a good one. Yeah. Okay. And I go through it and he goes, you're really going to read Dostoevsky? I said, yeah. I've read parts of it and this is a really good rendition. And then I had this other book and he said, you can read Greek? And I said, yeah, kind of. And he goes, okay, you can read any book you want in this place. They're yours. I'm giving them all to you. And I said, Mr. Anderson, no. Don't worry about it. I'm 90 years old. And what am I going to do with them? No. If you're going to read them. Take them home. Have a good time. Keep them. Whatever book you really like, keep. And actually, until I got rid of my books, I had a bunch of the books that he had because, Mr. Anderson gave them to me. Anyway, so for a good, strong 4 years, I'd go hang out with him. And I'd hang out with, because, Desmond and what was Joffrey. I don't Joffrey. It was a name kind of like that, but maybe not. It was Scottish. So whatever Scottish of Joffrey. But he was in the English SAS. He was a stone cold killer assassin. And he retired at 30 and basically, went to the protective industry and, basically, I think Mr. Anderson was his first and only employer, and he stopped working for the business he was rented out by and just stayed with Mr. Anderson. But anyway, I had a very interesting 3rd to 8th grade. And like I said, I got my brother hooked up with Debbie Soul's sister, and they kind of, and basically Debbie Soul's older sister was already going out with guys with money and power and interestingness. But, she knew me. She liked me, meaning the older sister. And she really, we call them the Soul Sisters. There were 5 of them, 2 boys, 5 girls. The mother was unbelievable. And the father just was like working himself to death, right? And so they were known as the Soul Sisters. And they were Italian. And so all of the sisters, Debbie was the youngest, and all the sisters loved and cherished, and they were a crew unto themselves, the Soul Sisters. And so they, so I got to know those girls, and they used to come swimming over at our pool. And before we got our pool, we used to all go swimming at Mr. Anderson's, and he got a little too, not excited like angry, but excited like seeing these like nubile because some of these, the 4 girls that were in our crew, they all had sisters that were, 3 to 5 years older than they were. And they were all, so it's like having 12 Lolitas there, So poor Mr. Anderson, his little heart was going to a flutter. And so he one time says, I see your parents are building a swimming pool on your property. I go, yes. He goes, well, you can come swim in here anytime you want. You can come with your crew, but you can't. The Lolita girls, I'm going to die sooner than I'm supposed to because I just keep, and I can't do anything about it. I can't even, and that's when the first time I heard about masturbation. I can't even jerk off. So anyway, he goes, but I'm having some pretty great, evening seminal dreams. We had some great Christmases in that house, my parents' house, in that part of Long Island, right on the border of Suffolk and Nassau County, right near Glen Cove and Garden City and Oldfield. And one of the reasons why my dad bought this place, he got a pretty good deal on it because it was a really great laid out house, but the guy who built it was so cheap. Everything was cheap. And his aesthetics were like, he used this really strange bamboo wallpaper that came from, Japan, China or someplace. And it was infested with insects. So once they put it up there within a year, the whole place was like, so my dad basically had, got the house for like nothing. Property was 8 acres, amazing property. And he had a whole, because the guy who developed these 6 houses on this cul-de-sac that had been part of a farm, he bought part of the Young's farm. And he built these 6 houses. He had one for himself and the other he sold, right? And he probably spent maybe, $15,000 on the 40 acres he bought from Mr. Young. And he probably spent, and they were all what were known as how that, I don't know if you guys know about it, but Sears used to sell everything, right? And they sold houses like, you'd buy this package and it had everything, every stick of wood, you name it. And they're called Sears houses and Sears bungalows. And they had 5, they had a bungalow, little house, bigger. They were a pretty big house. And you could buy it and assemble it yourself, right? And, that was just, they were doing that in the 20s and 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And that's where that was the whole pre-made house industry came from that, right? And there were other folks who did it, not as good. But so this guy bought these kits from maybe from China, who knows where he got them. But this wallpaper was made out of bamboo and it had insects in it. And these houses were like really, so the one my dad was the most infected. And he tore everything down to the studs, right? And he, blew out walls and made rooms bigger and smaller. There was 6 of us, so they took the 3 big bedrooms, and they were like almost suites. And he kept a nice big suite. He made the one from him and my mom. So they had their own bathroom, their own closets, and they had the thing out to that. They had the French doors going out to the big patio. It's really laid out very nice. And he tore it all apart, then had it fumigate. They put the whole tent over the thing. They, fumigated it, kept it super poisoned for like, weeks on end. And then they went and sandblasted everything. And then they redid all the plumbing and electrics and everything and kept the walls open, and to see if any bugs showed up, and nobody did. And then they put sheetrock and, mudded it up and painted it, and there were no insects after that. So, he bought this really amazing piece of property in an amazing location, an amazing house. And he bought it for something like $30,000, right? And the other houses at that time, this was 1960, was sold for about 60, 70 grand, right? And so the house in Freeport, which was a nice house, he kind of sold it for, I don't know what, but twice what the house he bought. And then that other half he used to rip it apart and fix it all up and build it all nice and rewire it, replumb it. Because he had old houses that always had electric problems and plumbing problems. So that was a really great house. And then about a year or two later, he put in Mr. Anderson, a pool at Mr. Anderson's, because he always wanted to be a millionaire. Commies. Guys, unless you come on and tell us who you are and show us that you've got a good heart, basically, this is what we're going to do. I can't just get rid of them. No. Hide user. I don't want to just hide you. I want to get rid of you. Report. Pen message. Okay, everybody. There's only one left. And so there's these Russian guys that I have no idea who they are. And that's why I just got rid of them, because I can't even, if they were to at least be in English and show that they are part of the cadre in good heart, good soul, good word, good thought, good actions, hey, welcome aboard. But, I've learned that they could be nasty characters, and they keep creeping in. And I already had a little issue with this, meaning I got stuck, and on Christmas Day, it unstuck itself. So anyway, I'm about to leave. So happy everything to everybody. I'll see you tomorrow if I can, but within, a day or so, right? Okay. And anybody wants to get a hold of me, again, I would love it if any of you want to get a hold of me at the dudeawake42 at Gmail, and that we could build another platform, because Dreamy Dreamland has hit a certain level of it's, I've been doing it for almost 3 years now. I have almost 500 subscribers, and a good 100 adepts and a good 300 cadre, and quality over, right? So I'd love it to take everybody into a new land where maybe even have our own website, do something. But I have, I'm now doing this has forced me to become more technically adroit, but I'm still not the best. I need a crew, right? Okay. So I love you guys. I say goodnight here. Good night. Good night. Happy Christmas to all. Let Christmas be in your heart like Jesus Christ's love. Let Christmas be every day, 24/7, 360, not just on one day. I love you all.